Take it away.
Okay, well, look, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this this webinar. It's been something that Nathan and I have sort of initially we were going to do a function together, but at a venue. But obviously, with everything that's going on, we moved with the times. So thank you for joining us. We think this would be a very informative meeting, and hopefully something that everyone gets to take something away with it, and especially during this uncertain time. Hopefully we can give you some information and make this a little bit clearer to say that look, it's not all doom and gloom, and there's some great opportunities out there, and we think we can go business as usual. Sorry. First of all, I just sort of let you know a little bit about Steady On, who we are and what we do. Steady On, we're basically your one-stop shop in terms of helping you if you're looking to invest in or purchase property. We help connect with our trusted partners who are the experts in their field to be able to look after everything from finance, insurance, looking for the property, managing a property, selling your property, all that sort of stuff. So all things property, we can help you and help facilitate you to be able to achieve that. So if there's anything in that field you think you need help with or unsure, if you come with us, we're connected with our network of trusted partners to be able to put you in the right direction and help achieve your goals that you want to do. With this webinar, just a couple of little housekeeping things. If you've got any questions, we've had some questions filled before, but there's a little Q&A icon down the bottom. If you put it down there, we'll be able to answer some questions, whether it might be during the presentation or there is a question and answer period at the end. There might be some polls that pop up on your screen during the presentation. Just click on that and we'll be able to see that we might give us a bit of a segue to some discussion or something that someone might have. So to introduce you to this, we're in partnership here with Steady On with I Buy New, and we have Nathan who's presenting on that behalf. We also have Ted Richards from Six Park and Andrew Merrington from Cube Finance, who are also going to present today to give you a little bit of a snapshot. As I said, if you've got any questions, click on that icon, but there'll be some discussion at the end of the presentation. Hopefully you get something about it and out of this presentation. And as we said, I'll pass it over to Nathan to kick it off.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Well, guys, my name's Nathan Luton. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Manager at I Buy New. It's essentially a fancy way of saying that I'm out there just building relationships with our trusted advisors and the people that we work closely with to really bring you value. So whether that be builders that we can trust to deliver a good quality build for you, whether it be developer partners to find the right land or the right apartment or townhouse projects, I'm out there building relationships and get a little bit of a kick out of this sort of stuff and helping people move forward the entire process of purchasing a property. And that's what today is all about. So look, I Buy New specialise in helping people identify and secure high-performing off-the-plan properties. So we don't do established property, but we're not here to say that that's not a good option for you. We're merely here to show you the things that we do well, which is off the plan. I'll dig a little bit further into what off the plan means, but we sort of say high performing because we help both first home buyers as well as investors. And investors, high performing makes sense. You want something that's obviously going to yield well and grow well to build your wealth. But even for first home buyers, high performing should probably be something that you'd be keen on, because essentially that first property likely isn't going to be your forever home. So yeah, we're there to help you identify, so find and then secure that property. So just moving on to, I guess, the crux of today is really about simplifying the journey. Finding a property and finding the right type of property can be a relatively daunting task at times. And so we like to really simplify it into 3 simple stages. The first one being finance, second being identify, as I've talked about before, and the third one being securing. So we're going to sort of, I guess, take the entire journey, which is, I guess, much more longer and more complicated than these 3 stages, and really bring them back to this to just make it more simple and hopefully a nice, enjoyable process for you. Finance It's got to come first. There's no doubt for those who have purchased property before, you'll understand the importance of finance. For those who haven't, it's worth understanding that if you have your finances set up well, your journey will be relatively enjoyable. It should be, and it'll just mitigate any risk you've got. So understanding your budget, and also understanding things like what you can borrow and repayment amounts to make sure that you can purchase that property but still live a life that you're comfortable living and do something, whether it be have a pizza at the end of the week or go out with a friend for a drink. We don't want you to stretch too far, so we're really keen on pairing up with the right finance partner, and that's why we've got Andrew Merrington here from Cube Financial Group today. Just before I throw over to Andrew, one thing we want to mention is that Andrew is a finance broker, and a broker is someone that can really help you understand all your options across the finance landscape. We're not saying that you shouldn't go directly to a bank. In fact, you certainly can. I use a broker. Everyone that I know uses a broker merely because they can, I guess, do that shopping for you and find you the best solution. So we've got a broker here today. I'll pass over to Andrew to give you a bit of an understanding around what a broker's all about and how they can assist. Actually, Andrew, sorry, just before I do that, mate, I might just cover a little bit more about iBuyNew, sorry. Just quickly, guys, we're a national team with national opportunities, which means that we don't just focus on any one given state. We sort of look across the national country and understand what's happening in every state, every city, as well as regional areas, to therefore make sure that we're across all property types and locations, just in case you are one of those borderless investors. And even if you're not, maybe you want to explore those options. So although we're quite big centric, we've got offices in 4 states, and we're quite strong along the eastern seaboard, being Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, or Queensland in general, particularly the sunny coast as well. We pair up with a whole range of independent businesses to make sure that some of the research we bring to you and some of the things that we say aren't just opinions, albeit we have some pretty good experience on the ground every day. We like to make sure that some of the statistics and some of the property updates we bring to you are backed by some of the better, or some of the best, I should say, property research organisations. And those logos along the bottom there really capture the best in the business, particularly CoreLogic, who's probably up there with the best provider of property research in the country. A personal favourite of mine, Oliver Hume, and then a good friend, Terry Ryder at Hotspotting, who helps us out quite a bit too. So we do lean on those groups to make sure we're bringing you the latest, most up-to-date information alongside our team of experienced investors and property professionals. As I said earlier, we do cover all 3 property types. So we cover apartments, townhouses, and house and land. Apartments typically are going to be that little bit closer in, often in that CBD area or the first couple of Ks out. Townhouses in Melbourne, for example, would be often that middle ring we refer to, and then house and land being more in those what we call greenfield suburbs or more developing suburbs. We'll go into that a little bit further later on. The major reason our clients enjoy using our service is because we're independent. So we do not align to any one builder or any one developer. So whilst we're there to help you find the right solution, we're not merely going to push a product for the sake of making a sale. In fact, we just think that in time, when we find you the right solution, we offer great service, you'll see that there's value and there's trust there, and we'll end up doing some business together. So we actually rather sit back, understand your brief a little bit better. And the way we can then deliver is by working with a panel of builders and a panel of developers. So if you're someone that's looking to build a home, we've got a panel of 10 builders that we can rely on, that we know can deliver quality product. It also allows us to have a range of options too, whether it be a price-pointed solution or whether it be a high specification, a beautiful forever home, perhaps somewhere in between, or even a build that might need a bit more customization. We've got it covered, particularly all the build regions as well around the country. Another part is the developer panel. So whether it be land developers or building developers, being those who create groups of apartments, whether it be the big towers or the more boutique-y apartment developments, which we really like, we've got it covered with the best in the business. So we're really clear that we are not there to peddle one product or one offering. We're there to really find out what do you need, what's important to you, and then using our panel to deliver the right options for you. One of the more proud things about this business of late is RACV's become our major shareholder. They backed us in and they now own about 30-odd% or a little bit more as of the start of last year. And we're pretty proud of that. RACV has obviously a really reputable name and a really trusted brand, and they've decided to back us in, which we're really proud of. And it's off the back of us offering some really good service and being very trustworthy as a business, and our ethics are really strong. So we're really excited by that and continue to let people know about that backing. I've got the REIV there, but in fact, we're a part of the institute across all states, making sure we're registered as real estate agents, albeit we don't often align ourselves with the name real estate agents. We don't always love that title. And then we're also on the PIPA panel, so the Property Investments Professionals of Australia panel. And for anyone who sees that logo, that's essentially a governing body that likes to watch the industry and make sure everyone's doing the right things. We're really proud to be a part of those three things, but particularly the RACV. We would often provide a market update in a webinar or in a workshop in person. For the sake of time today, we probably don't have a lot of time to go into the detail if we're then going to cover the process of buying a property, but it's worth just touching on a couple of key things. What I'd encourage everyone to do is after this webinar, we will send out a copy of this presentation, and you'll see some slides that cover off in some detail some of the more recent data that's being promoted around what's happening in the property market, particularly relevant to the effect of COVID-19, the virus, on the economy, which does have an effect on the property market itself. I'm going to pass through this, but do have a look later on. The stats are there. We're not in any way trying to hide from the fact that it does have an effect. But what we'd probably encourage everyone to do is really understand the fundamentals of property and make sure we really lean on those fundamentals. So I'd sit there and say that off the back of everything that's going on, what has happened is the activity around the real estate industry and the property market, activity meaning listings, people selling or looking to rent out homes, valuations being ordered from banks. For the first home buyers out there, we can talk about valuations a bit further later on. All that activity has slowed down, but what it hasn't done yet is had an effect on property value. And so what that probably suggests is that there's a bit of a holding pattern in the market where people aren't necessarily suddenly selling all of a sudden. They're not looking to rush out of their home and sell it and get cash in their pockets. They're sitting tight. They're in a holding pattern. They're just waiting to see what's going on. So by no means are we sitting here saying now's the right time, but we're certainly not saying it's not. In fact, anyone in a strong financial position who understands their finances and what they can afford, now's actually a fantastic time to take advantage of some unique offers that are out there. So as I said, we won't be peddling anything today, but we're there to say that for those who have got an understanding of their finances, now is certainly a great time to have a look at what's out there. The fundamentals are something that we need to be looking at no matter the state of the market. And the fundamentals really in this country often hinge on population growth. This country continues to grow at about 1.6% a year, and that's a pretty impressive figure. And to give some context around that, Melbourne still has over 120,000 people coming in a year. And to give you a bit of an idea around what that means, we're going to fall short in 2020, building homes, we're going to fall short about 50,000 dwellings. So a really beautiful fundamental we're relying on the property market is supply and demand, and I guess economics 101. And that is that right now supply, the ability to build dwellings, whether it be home and land, townhouses or apartments, cannot keep up with demand. And as long as supply continues to fall short of demand, house prices will continue to rise. And that's just a fundamental, that's economics. So we don't like to confuse the situation too much. We're not saying that there's nothing to be looking at with COVID, but we're certainly saying the fundamentals are key. And you'll find that the Australian property market weathers the storm, whether it be economic or other, really, really well if we look at history. So the other fundamentals we like to focus on, which we talk with you more one-on-one after a webinar like this, would be location. Location is key to finding obviously a good property and one that's going to grow really well in value, but also infrastructure. So things like transport, amenity like schools and shops and access to that amenity, and obviously quality product at the end of the day. And that comes back to our panel of builders and developers to allow us to deliver on quality product. So as I said earlier, I jumped the gun before. First step is certainly finance. We'd encourage everyone to understand their finance position, and that way we can help you the best we possibly can. So I'll throw over to Andrew Merrington from Cube Finance.
Thanks, Nathan. And thanks Ryan and Steady On for giving us the opportunity to have a chat today. Firstly, just a bit about us as a business and me personally. I've been in the industry for 15 years. We're an independent brokerage company that has access to over 30 financiers and banks on our panel, a few to the right there. Some that you obviously would have heard of, the majors, some sort of second tier and specialised lenders that you may not have heard of. Out of that 30, we can certainly go off panel if the circumstances do need to. Personally, I've got a Bachelor of Business where I majored in banking and finance. Then I went into working within the banks, stayed there for a few years, and then saw the light of the broking world where you can offer many products instead of just the one, and then sort of moved on to actually practicing as a broker. But the current lending landscape, I thought I'd just have a quick chat around that. And I suppose it's a bit of remiss of me not to talk initially about coronavirus and how that has impacted the banks and the way they're doing things. Three probably basic questions that banks are asking at the moment is what the immediate impact has been on your circumstances with employment and ultimately income. You know, whether you're seeing a drop in hours, you've lost your job, or if you're in those higher risk industries, you know, what the impact has been. They'll then want to sort of go on and ask the questions about what the future impact will be. If you've got a bit of an understanding of how long you're going to be involved or impacted for, they like to get a bit of commentary around that. And the last one is just if there's any contingencies around your current circumstances. Have you got some cash reserves in place? Have you got some government allowances that are actually coming to fruition that you're actually taking advantage of? Next point there, I just sort of mentioned about the interest rates at all-time lows. You get sort of owner-occupied rates at the moment for about 2.19%, and investor rates from 2.49%. You know, it's a rate. It's just unbelievable how rates are at the moment, with GFC rates at 8% and stock market crash rates in 87 at 17%. So it really is a great opportunity if you are stable and ready to buy to take advantage of some low rates. Lastly, just sort of mentioned there what Nathan was talking about, some great buying opportunities for properties are on the market. You know, obviously activity has slowed, but if you're in a stable position, properties that are on the market, you've really got some motivated vendors or sellers that need to sell. So you can sort of take some advantages there. We'll nextly talk about the first home buyers. The webinar is centered around the first homeowners. So a bit of a slide there on some benefits that are available to you. You're buying or building a new home, you're eligible for a $10,000 grant for a property that's less than 5 years old, under 750, and it must be the first sale of the property as a residential premises. You're not eligible if you've owned a property before or received the first homeowner grant, you know, around that date of 1st of July 2000 for a continuous period of 6 months. You must be an Australian citizen or permanent resident. You must occupy the property as a principal residence for at least 12 months, commencing within 12 months of settlement or completion of that construction. If you are buying in a regional centre, you may be eligible for another $10,000 on top of that initial $10,000 injection. Stamp duty savings are there no matter what property you do buy, whether it's established or new, under that 750 mark. Under 600, there'll be no stamp duty. But 600 to 750 range, you'll scale into the full duty at the 750. So in essence, probably about 700, you're still getting some savings on stamp duty, but it's probably about half as what you pay for a full duty property. So benefits are still there over that 600 mark, but probably not as much as what it is. When applying for a loan, so just the next slide there, the general process is, obviously, if you engage a mortgage broker or a trusted advisor, would firstly then gather all documentation, being pay slips, tax returns, loan statements, anything that is required to submit an application, we do get up front. So we take a bit of a position on you, see what your circumstances are, and then from there, work out borrowing capacities, and then sort of determine what loans will be suitable for you. These are all obviously in line with your objectives and goals going forward. In terms of the deposit, ideally 20% of the purchase price is sort of recommended, which is a safe lending margin of the banks. But if not, and in today's current environment, 20% is very difficult to save up. There are opportunities to still go and purchase a property if you're willing to pay some mortgage insurance. Mortgage insurance is something that you get no benefit from, but it's a It's a once-off premium that's sort of insisted by the banks, where a third party takes over the risk that the banks are not willing to take on. So about a 5% deposit is required. You can go up to for that of the purchase price. If you've got some family members or some guarantors that are close to you, you're able to use what they call is a family pledge, which is using some existing equity that the parents or relatives or someone close to you, they're able to offer as support. Here you don't need a deposit at all, where a 0% deposit you can get away with. They're even all allow a situation where you can fund the cost of that purchase as well. So you can go up to 110% of the value of the property. The final bit is the equity in the property. If you've got some other existing property, you can use some equity in there as well. So they're probably the steps where the pre-approval takes place. Once you find the property and a contract is signed, then you formalise the approval on the back of that. Some closing thoughts with the finance. So just on the next slide there, Nathan. First one here is what Nathan was saying originally. You just need to be finance ready. You need to be organised in your process. It is a situation where circumstances are changing quite rapidly in a lending environment. Banks are getting challenged by people's circumstances, where jobs, COVID, everything like that is changing people the way they do things. So it is pretty important to have things nice and organised, and staying close to your trusted advisor throughout the process. But getting that pre-approval in play, and then sort of when you are getting close to making offers and purchasing a property, it is recommended that you do stay pretty close to your advisor, just in case circumstances have changed prior to the approval being in place, because we are seeing banks where approvals have been taken away because they're reviewing everything now. You know, a pre-approval, it's good to have, but you need to make sure that it is current. You know, the 3-month period that they do last for in the old days is probably not relevant anymore. You need to make sure that, you know, it's every month or every few weeks, you're just touching base. If things do change, you do stay nice and close to advisors. Post-Royal Commission, monthly expenses was a massive focus. And this sort of goes hand in hand with getting finance ready, getting organised, getting your monthly spend in play, because banks are now looking at statements going back as long as 3 months, just to check out what you're actually spending your money on, just to formulate a bit of an idea of what your monthly expenditure is, which is going to affect your borrowing capacity. So you just want to make sure that when you are leading into a purchase and thinking of applying for a loan, that you have your monthly spending check. So basically being organised in that front. And finally, obviously we are in what they call unprecedented times, but banks are still really open for business. You know, activity has dropped, but on a daily basis, we are seeing emails come across our desk with some really good offers from banks. And obviously having access to all the banks at our fingertips, we're able to then pass on those offers to you, which for circumstances do suit. And then obviously if people haven't used a broker before, our service is free. So we work for you, not the banks. The banks pay us on settlement of the loan, with all commissions basically the same. So there's no bias towards any lenders. We're working to get you the best offering. So yeah, don't hesitate. Give us a call. Any questions, start the process. We're here to help.
Andrew, there's a quick question from the audience. They were just wondering for self-employed, people self-employed, whether during this COVID-19, low doc loans still available?
They are still available on a very limited basis. You do need to provide more information now than what you previously did. They are asking to see BAS statements. They are wanting accountants to be involved, just to make sure that they are you know, as part of the process, the trusted advisor, that they're aware of what the client's doing and able to sign off on a declaration that allows the borrower to say that, okay, they're earning this amount of money. They're able to still afford a loan with a commitment of that such. So definitely still available, but not as vast as they once were. So yeah, there's a couple out there that we do prefer. There's probably 2 or 3 that we are using at the moment that are really sort of a lot easier to deal with than a few of the others. So yeah, definitely still available.
Great. Well, good question. Really good question there. I'd suggest that that person gets out and contacts Andrew directly to just understand options. But yeah, really interesting, Andrew. Thanks for that. I think we can't push finance enough. So look, we've just got another question pop up. Will we save it for later? No, a big thank you. Our pleasure. All right. So moving on, identify. So identifying the right property is more than just about location. Obviously, location, you know, you hear people talk about location. It's such a key thing, but it's also about the right property type. And as I said, we do cover all 3 new property types, being townhouses, apartments, and house and land. So just going into the fundamental of location, we deal across the country. So if someone's got an interest in a certain state, we can certainly provide options. There's no doubt about it. But just in terms of a bit of an interesting fact for those out there right now, iBuyNew's doing quite a lot of work in Victoria. Victoria still seems to be leading the way, I guess, with selection and price point. But certainly we're watching the Sunshine Coast closely, and there's some really exciting things going on up there. So we'd encourage any investor to be looking at borderless investing and at least understanding their options, so we can help with that. But we'll move forward. And I was just going to use Victoria as a bit of an example, and all the states work this way in terms of the concentration of what we call density, so apartments and townhouses to some extent, closer into the city, and then moving out to more land, house and land, even right out to regional, and how that affects price points and different offerings. It's just worth understanding what's out there. So in Victoria, we tend to see apartments obviously concentrated in the CBD itself, but also that first couple of kilometres out. And there's certainly good buying in there. Apartments tend to be anywhere between the high 3s right up to as much as you want to spend, but a typical 2-bed in a good location close to the city, let's say, might be between, you know, $450 if you're lucky, and let's say $700. But they're just very big ballparks, or ranges, I should say. The townhouses, which have been a real hot topic of Melbourne in the last sort of 5 years or plus, that middle ring of Melbourne, allowing people to get in, not too far out, but obviously it comes with a price point. But there is a bit more density going on in the middle ring, meaning townhouse projects, I should say, are going on, knocking down those old McMansions and setting up 2 or 3 or 4 in that space. And then out to what we call the greenfield suburbs, or the developing areas. So in Melbourne, that would be the north, so your Wollert, Donnybrook, Calcallo, Mickleham, northwest, Sunbury, Plumpton, those sorts of areas. West being Werribee, formerly Tarneit, Truganina, those areas. The Geelong Growth Corridor has been one of the best performing regions in the country for the last 5 to 10 years, and we still have a lot of confidence around that space. And in the southeast, which we've done a lot of work out there, the Clyde, Cranbourne, Officer and beyond. So the greenfields certainly present options at a really great price point, good yielding options, but also really great short-term growth while sustained long-term growth. In terms of regional is something that this business is really in favour of. You can certainly achieve amazing price points. 4-bedroom homes on 600, 700, 800 square metres at, you know, low 400s to mid 400s purchase price. So it's quite amazing what you can achieve. For the first home buyers, don't be overwhelmed by any lingo I might be using. We can certainly explain any bits in more detail. But for anyone who might be tossing up the idea of rentvesting, buying a property somewhere else and renting where you want to live, which I'll cover later, regional is becoming a really big topic as a part of that conversation. So we do this with every state. We've got an understanding of the density, the beautiful apartments, the more boutique projects, the ones that will actually deliver great product and aren't oversupplied, right through those townhouses in the middle ring, home and land out in the green fields, and then again home and land out in the regional spaces. In terms of property selection and I guess that discussion of new versus established, it's a really interesting one. I've had this discussion for years now, and again, we're not here to say that established isn't the way to go. In fact, if that's right for you, then absolutely by all means explore it and explore it well. What we'd encourage is people to understand the benefits of new property, and just as a part of the decision making, just compare it against established. What we'll find for the most part is that the barrier to entry, or the price tag to get into a property, is often a bit lower on new property. So as I said before, home and land can often start at the low 400s, even in the threes, depending on where you're looking and what sort of property you're looking at, and then up to, let's say, around about $550,000-$600,000 in those sort of greenfields areas. But obviously higher as you go into the density. The townhouses, apartments can actually be cheaper again, but just depending. Stamp duty, as Andrew covered off on, for the first home buyers out there, it's essentially a duty or a tax on your purchase. The benefit to off the plan is that you can often pay a hell of a lot less in stamps. In fact, for first home buyers, there's often no stamp duty at all. But even for investors, on a home and land package, for example, an investor would only be paying stamp duty on the land portion only. So there are some significant savings around stamp duty and the purchase in general. Low maintenance, it's an obvious one. It's a brand new property, and therefore there's no maintenance just yet, and you'll find that it's just a slow ramp up into the normal maintenance schedule you might have with an existing property or an older property. The structural guarantees and warranties are a big one. So when you build a new property, you've got structural guarantees provided by the builder and developer. You'll have warranties on all your appliances and everything that's in that. So you'll find that you've got that peace of mind around the guarantees and the warranties. And also, jumping down a few points, you'll have a bit more to deduct there in terms of the tax time, which I won't go into because I can't give financial advice, but certainly worth talking to your accountant about that. In regards to growth and yield, it's a hotly debated topic around, are you chasing growth or are you chasing yield? So for the first time, or for the first home buyers or the first time investors, yield is essentially what you're getting in rent per week, and your growth is what you're chasing. We call capital growth, what it's making over time, the value of the property going up. And people often think, and it's a bit of a misconception in our eyes, people think that you can only have one or the other. But that's just not accurate. If you get the location right, you're going to achieve both. There's no doubt that an established property in the middle ring of any major city is going to perhaps I say, grow more, but the reality is it's a lot higher to get in. You might find a lower purchase price in new property, achieve some significant growth short term, and then jump on board the normal slow but steady growth of the property market in the country. In saying that, it does come down to location and property type. So we say these as, I guess, general statements, but we want to explore what you're trying to achieve and show you the options with specific dollar values attached in terms of predicted growth and yield. Just in terms of yield or rental income, I guess is another way I could put it. You'll find that new properties do rent for a bit more money than established. So I'm one of those cases where when I bought my first place, I thought that was the way to go. I bought established. And in fact, I found that a new property that would have cost me $100,000 less may have actually rented for more, albeit 20 minutes further out. So it's just horses for courses and understanding what you're trying to achieve. But often the new properties will rent for that bit higher, particularly when you get the location right, they'll rent for significantly more. Interesting point to touch on regional there for anyone interested. Lower price point, much higher yield. So for the investors who are just looking for a bit more to chew on, you might be achieving 3.5-4% yield in metro if you're lucky. In regional, we're seeing 5.5-6%, even more in regional comfortably, plus some really good growth when you get the city right, which is often about infrastructure, which I won't get off on a tangent there. Large tax deductions, as I said, so talking to your accountant about the deductions around new property. Obviously, you can write off a lot more for the first home buyers, not so relevant to you, but certainly for the first-time investor or the seasonal investor, the new properties are often why people go for them, about write-offs and position there regarding tax. And then cash flow. Cash flow is a case-by-case basis, something we certainly can't generalise, but often if you're buying at a lower price and it's bringing in a good amount of rent or your mortgage is lower, it leaves you in a better cash position, and often is an easier way to get yourself into the market or an easier way to keep building the amount of assets that you have in your portfolio rather than a high price tag of the established areas. But again, general, but something that we do a lot of and really confident in ourselves and all seasoned investors as well. In terms of the three property types, and I am moving quite quickly, but don't worry, we can go through this in more detail one-on-one after this, should anyone like that. But house and land, the benefits of house and land are really simple. You've got choice. There are literally hundreds of land estates around any given state. You're getting more space, and one of the things I really like is you're getting land. Land is the appreciating asset, and the house itself or the dwelling itself is a depreciating asset. Therefore, we love land. It's not to say that apartments isn't the right option for you, but again, for the investors, often land is something they're after, but not necessarily. It comes down to the individual requirement, but I personally like a bit of land. Privacy is a really good one. So obviously you're getting a bit bigger of a dwelling, perhaps a bit of distance between yourself and the neighbour, albeit getting smaller as land gets cut up smaller, as prices increase in the Australian property market. And affordability is definitely a big one. So as I said before, ranging on prices in home and land anywhere around the country, we're talking, mid 300s right up to, let's say, 550, 600 or more. We probably say that on average, as iBuyNew, we probably see most of our home and land packages sitting around about that 4 to 550 mark. One of the things I wanted to highlight is there's quite a process around finding the right property, as we've sort of indicated so far. The first part's find the right location. And for home and land, that'd be understanding what corridor we'd refer to it as. So the northern corridor, for example, find the right location. And then it's about finding home and land together. Some people sort of go after land and think they have to secure land and figure out the build later. And some people think they go and look at homes first. There's no right or wrong, but we'd say that to make sure you have a really good journey and to make sure that both come in and fit your budget, we really need to address them as a whole. So we'd encourage people to give us a really thorough brief. We'll go out and find options, or we'll go with you and help you find options and make sure that what we're spending on the land and what we're allowing for the house is going to really provide a solution you're happy with at the end of the day. And there are multiple factors that we think about when it comes to our home and land. There's quality. So there's a big difference between a piece of land around the corner that's $50,000 less than another block 5 minutes down the road. There's a reason. You'll get what you pay for. So quality is really important to us, making sure we find a developer, a land developer, that can deliver that block at the time they say they will, deliver the amenity in the area that they say they will, and really set yourself up for a good experience. So quality land developers is key, but also quality builders to result in a good quality outcome for you to live in or to rent out. Size is really important. We don't want to go and overspend on a block of land and find we don't have enough money to build the house you're hoping to build, or the house with enough bedrooms to rent it out for more, or whatever the objective might be. Pricing is obviously very important in general. Orientation is a little detail that people forget about. We certainly like to make sure that we understand where the sun rises and sets, because it makes a big difference when you're living in a home, but also the saleability of your property when it comes to selling it. If you're in a hot market, you want all the little advantages you can get, and we certainly understand those, one of them being orientation. And timing. Timing is really important, because in home and land, often land isn't ready to build on straight away, but sometimes it is. And just understanding what you're trying to achieve by when, as well as your finances, timing becomes a key factor. So we're trying to put all these pieces together to make sure we find a quality solution that meets your requirements. We do it every day. We feel really comfortable with it, but we'd say that this is why we're here to help, because there is so much to think about. Regarding townhouses, so the benefit of townhouses is often the proximity or locations that little bit better. We do have plenty of townhouses out in the greenfield suburbs, out in those developing areas. However, often townhouses might be in that, what we refer to, that middle ring. Depending on the state you're in, we might be talking, 10 kilometres out of Brisbane, or let's say 15 kilometres out of Melbourne, where you've got some townhouse projects where we once had those big McMansions that are no longer really desirable or affordable, and therefore we're knocking those down and seeing projects of 2, 3, 4, 5, or more townhouses. So location might be that little bit better. You'll have that slightly smaller portion of land, but you'll still have a portion of land, that appreciating asset. And then affordability. Obviously, buying a house in that same area may not be affordable for a lot of people, and therefore it does offer you that ability to get in, and also low maintenance or lower maintenance than, I guess, house and land being a smaller block, smaller external maintenance. Again, I won't go through the process, but this time it's location's key. The townhouse project itself is really important, particularly aligning with the right developer, not just a cheap property for the sake of getting in, but a developer that's been there, done that. They've got a track record, and that's where our panel of builders and developers come in to make sure we're recommending the right property type and the right location to get you the right outcome. And again, quality, size, price, orientation, and timing are some of the key things we look at. Regarding apartments. Apartments are a really interesting conversation. Our director, John Rankin, is a big fan of apartments. When I first came to the business, I wasn't so keen, and now I understand that they actually have a real role to play. Depending on where you are in the country and depending on what you're trying to achieve, particularly what part of your life you're in, apartments may very well be the right option for you. So our position is very much, we love the boutique apartments, that sort of, 50 odd, 60 residences in a development. We're not as keen on the developments that may have 500, for example. But again, in saying that, they certainly offer some benefits that house and land and townhouses cannot offer. And so therefore, it's again about finding the right apartment development. So apartments will typically give you a premium location, being as close as you're going to get to the CBD, should that be something that's desirable to you. Demographics, you're often surrounded by similar people, whether it be young party goers, whether it be people studying, whether it be downsizers looking to be in around all the nice restaurants. There's a different, a few different groups or different demographics that are attracted towards apartments. Very low maintenance. Obviously, there is no land. So you have got the negative if you're not buying a parcel of land, but that may not be relevant to you at this stage. And the benefit is you have near no maintenance. So you might have a balcony, might have a little bit of gardening to do if you're lucky, but that's about it. Affordability is certainly a key with apartments. We are helping people with one-bedroom apartments in beautiful developments starting in the 300s, which is quite incredible considering the location. And you can go up and spend as much as you want to on an apartment, but typically we, again, sit in the, let's say, 400 to 700 mark with apartments, but can certainly get higher depending on whether you have car spaces is often a trigger to a higher price tag, being that you're in a more premium location. Facilities, so you've often got facilities or amenity, I guess, in the building, things like pools and gyms, where you don't have to worry about paying, I guess, necessarily memberships, albeit there is some body corporates at times, and the lifestyle factor that it gives you, commuting and those amenities or facilities that I mentioned before. We just got a little thing pop in here. Apartments have a reputation or stigma as being poor investments. Does the panel feel that's accurate or fair? It's a really good question. I actually wish we had our director, John Rankin, on right now. We probably don't think it's fair. We think it's about finding the right development. So, for example, if anyone were to Google Blue Earth, it's one of the developers we align with best, and that's a developer that we have absolute confidence in can deliver a premium solution in the right locations. And they purchase land in very strategic locations, and lately that's around the hospitals and hospital workers and healthcare workers. So location of development is really important, as we've said. The developer itself and who they use as their builder, because often they're not the builder, is really important. And understandably, things like cladding were on the nose, but that's unfortunately something that happened that's now being stamped out, and so it should be. So again, the developer with a track record never played with the cheaper version of that material, that cladding material, and we know that if we pick the right developer in the right location, you can certainly make money on apartments. There's no doubt that it goes against the crux of Economics 101 around supply. It's easier to turn on supply. But again, when you have a premium location and a good developer, it does drive demand, and people want to be in that development because of that developer.
Nathan, it'd be that sort of stigma or reputations, probably more of those really big apartment developments. As you said, there's 100 plus more apartments there. They're probably the ones that have probably got that poor reputation. They've been slapped up quite cheap, really high density living. I think that when you're looking at those more boutique apartments in some of the real premium areas, they're very hot. They're always rented out, especially in that young professional sort of demographic. They're very easy to rent out because a lot of them don't need a car because they can walk to everything they need to, whether it's work, universities, all that sort of stuff. So there's probably you can probably put apartments in two different sort of categories, where you get those big development ones with a lot of apartments and that more small boutique ones.
Yeah, we agree. And it just comes back to, we're not here to push any one thing. We want to know what's important to you. What's your financial situation? What are you trying to achieve? And if apartment's it, well, then let's find the best possible outcome in the apartment world, because I've changed my position on it. There's no doubt about it. So yeah, it's horses for courses, and it's absolutely relevant to each individual person's requirements and position. Ryan, did you want to address Anthony Gigatz's comment that's just come through?
Yeah. Anthony's as an accountant has 3 clients who had no problem whatsoever requesting via their broker their bank defer loan payments for 6 months. They've thereby eliminating their concerns about COVID-19. Banks and brokers very accommodating, and the client's negative gearing tax benefits increased dramatically. In fact, not one property investor client has been stressed in these precedent times. And that's probably what I said in my introduction. And what Andrew touched on too, if you got your finances, and that is the key and the cornerstone to any sort of investing or purchasing, if you got your finances really sound and strong, there's some great opportunities there and ability to maybe build that portfolio.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I wish I could have gone into the effects of COVID more and what's actually being done out there. But we probably agree at the moment. There's there's absolutely opportunity, and certainly banks and different organisations are dealing with it really well at present. So we're still seeing plenty of people purchase in the market. Again, similar things we're looking for in terms of the fundamentals around quality, size, price. Orientation's a big one for apartments. You get the light into the dwelling, and timing again. But we won't go over that again. So again, the 3 simple stages, that's about identifying the right location, the right property type. And the next part's about securing. So before I hand over to Ted, I just thought I'd go into how much deposit do you need? And for those who are first home buyers out there, I spent quite a while working for one of the leading builders in the country, volume builders that specialised in first home buyers. And it actually surprised me to find out that you can actually get in for a hell of a low amount, a really small amount, I should say. But the reality is that we're not for 1 minute saying you shouldn't have more. So Andrew saying that 20% is what you want to aim for. It's a fantastic aim. The great news is that in new property, you can get in with a hell of a lot less. But it is important to know that the more you have, the less you're borrowing, and obviously the better position you're going to be in. But often people spend a long time saving and they try and outsave the market, and they can't, because property keeps increasing in value, and therefore often getting in or able to secure a property for a small deposit is a really helpful way to get in, and then maybe getting something that's not ready just yet and giving you some time to actually save the rest of that deposit before someone like Andrew or a broker then gets your formal finance approval. So just a bit of an example for those who haven't purchased new property before. With House and Land, an example would be a $480,000 turnkey package. That's it. It's all going to cost you $480,000. The land's worth $225,000 and the house price is worth $255,000. And that's a pretty realistic example at the moment, depending on where you're looking. You would typically need 5% of the land and 5% of the house. And I'll go into contracts a little bit later, but we are running out of time, so I'll fly through this. But you will need 5% typically, and 5% of those two is the values you see in front of you, with a total deposit required of about $24,000. Now, if you compare that to established property, potentially needing 10 or 20%, depending on the terms, the value would be a hell of a lot more. So often getting into House and Land from a deposits perspective is a bit easier, but also that total price is lower, and therefore it may be a lot more within your borrowing ability, or it might just be lower and therefore giving you a bit more room to breathe in life because you're borrowing less. So this is minimum deposits, I should say. Example two, an apartment. Often apartments might require a 10% deposit. That's not true across the board, but I guess typically we could say that 10% is around about right. And in this case, in a $530,000 property, you'd need about $53,000. Now, we're not factoring in here fees and charges. You'll need a couple of grand there, depending on the different things there, which I'd leave to a finance professional to talk about. But something really important to tap into here, and that is that in this current market, everything is negotiable and discounts and rebates are available. I don't throw that out lightly. So when I say everything negotiable, it doesn't mean you just jump in. You need a broker or someone to give you confidence around what you can actually afford to do. But once you do that, things are negotiable. So right now we're working with multiple clients on low deposit options, as low as $10,000 deposit. Again, you want to have more, but we're looking for something that's titling, meaning the property won't be ready for quite a long time, giving them a lot of time to save up the rest of that deposit, but securing it now at today's price. So we're not pushing any product here. What we're saying is that if you really want to get in and you're struggling to try and outsave the market and the growth, there is ability to get in on new property with low deposits. The other thing is that discounts and rebates are currently available, which we sort of hinted on earlier. Because of the market, the sales activity has slowed up a little bit in the property world, and therefore developers and builders prepared to, I guess, help, you might say, or maybe they want to do some more sales. Irrelevant of that, there's some great stuff happening out there for those who are in a position to purchase. So we'd encourage people in the essential services and those who do have a bit of clarity over their finances that now's a fantastic time because of what we're seeing. Again, I wouldn't want to throw out anything too big or too dramatic, but right now seeing $15,000, $20,000 rebates on land is not uncommon. What a rebate means, I won't go into now, but essentially there's opportunity to save tens of thousands on property. So we're pretty excited about property. We always are, and now isn't necessarily changing that by any means. So over to you, Ted. I believe you're going to launch a little presentation on your end, and just to let everyone know, we are running a bit over time. We're hoping you can stay with us, and we won't have too much more. You're on mute, Ted.
Yep. Thanks very much for the that, Nathan. I'm just going to do a little screen share here. Nathan, you might just need to hop off screen. Oh, there we are. I'll just get this up here. just while that's coming up, by way of introduction, my name's Ted Richards. I'm Director of Business Development at Six Park. And what I'll be speaking to you today is ways to help build a home deposit in a time of low interest rates. As I'm sure you're all aware that it's fantastic if you've got debt that you can now get interest rates, a mortgage in the vicinity of 2.5%. But the flip side to that coin is for those that are saving and working towards accumulating their home deposit, they're not getting much benefit from the low interest rate environment right now. As Nathan mentioned, we are slightly running behind time, so I will move quite quickly, but please do use that question and answer functionality to shoot me a question if you'd like me to dig deeper into any one aspect. And what I will mention before I move on here is what I am talking about here is a conservative investment strategy with a diversified portfolio. As always, the usual disclaimers. What we do at Six Park is provide clients with diversified portfolios according to their risk profile. And what I mean here is it is a risk assessment to determine your risk profile that takes into account your investment horizon, your risk appetite, and your investment experience. We put together all your answers from roughly a dozen questions, an investment portfolio to suit that goal that you're trying to achieve with an investment recommendation. So speaking specifically towards people working towards home deposit, having an investment goal in the next 3, 4, 5 years, it's probably going to be quite a conservative portfolio. I will be upfront. If you're looking to enter the property market in the next year or so, I think it's far more prudent and conservative just to stay in cash. But if you have a longer investment horizon, say 3, 4, 5 years, you can take on a little bit more risk, somewhat still conservative, just to maybe achieve a return in the vicinity of 5 or 6%, etc., which portfolios have performed over the last going back 5 years. So once you've got the recommendation, we create a cash management account with Macquarie Bank in your name, a trading account, execute the trades for you and manage it for you. So in the example of a conservative portfolio, this is how it might look. Diversified over up to 7 or 8 asset classes. Of all those asset classes you can see on the screen right now, the growth assets like Aussie and international equities, also known as shares, they'll be at a very low portion in your portfolio, approximately 5 to 10%. The majority of your portfolio in a conservative portfolio will be made up of a cash yield and bonds, which is another word to describe fixed income. And they'll be the predominant asset classes within your portfolio to provide that level of defense and resilience to your portfolio so it can hold up in times of volatility like we're experiencing right now. So let's fast forward into how this might be able to play out over an investment of an initial investment of $20,000, where you're contributing $250 a week. What I've built out here is a little calculator just to see how this can pan out over the years. So the darkest blue there represents that initial investment, the $20,000 each year. That shade of blue that's slightly lighter represents the benefits from the $250 a week and how that's helping boost your home deposit. And that lightest blue shade you can see is starting to harness the power of compound returns, and it's growing. So by the end of that 4th year, you've received a total interest benefit close to $10,000. And of course, the further your investment horizon, the more you're harnessing that power of compound returns. And this can all be achieved at a cost of 0.5% on $20,000, which is $100 a year. So That is the Six Park Investment Committee that oversee your asset allocations, including Brian Watson, the founding member of the Board of Guardians for the Australian Government Future Fund, Lindsay Tanner, the former Minister of Finance for the Australian Government, and Mark Nicholson, who sat in the investment division for the World Bank. Before I just take you on a very quick example, it is important that if this is something of interest, to use this link here. Maybe take a photo with your phone. Ryan and Nathan will have this in the notes after this presentation, but it's steadyon.sixpark.com.au, and that will ensure that if this can be of assistance to you in your investment journey to get into the property market, that you can also receive the first 6 months free. So what I might do very quickly is just do a little screen share. Okay, I'm just going to stop the share for now and get up another screen. Apologies for this. Okay. And this is an example of how it works. So you'd simply come to steadyon.sixpark.com.au, click here to get started. It takes just this will obviously be a test, so I'll enter some fictitious so this is a quick example of the risk assessment. And of course, this is free to do so. So you're a 35-year-old with a somewhat stable income. You're putting aside that $250 a week, like we mentioned, with your income being at that level. This is a question about your liquid assets, easily sellable assets. You'd like this available in the next 3 years. Here's a question about your risk appetite, being conservative. You'd like a safe investment. I'm quickly flying through these, but it's you can take this time, take it at any time. Okay, I've tried to get as conservative answers as possible. And this has come back with a conservative and balanced portfolio. And as I mentioned, a 60% allocation to defensive assets, 40% allocation to growth assets. And here's what your portfolio may look like. So that's an example of how Six Park and Steadyon can work together to help you get a home deposit and get you into the property market. I might hand it back over to you, Nathan.
Beautiful. Thanks, Ted. So, guys, the relevance there, particularly for first home buyers, was, I guess, linking the ability to take a small deposit you've currently got and perhaps build that should you be struggling to do so, but even for anyone else, just building deposits in general. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen again. We'll go back to PowerPoint. Apologies. Alrighty. So, sorry about that. All right. So we've obviously talked about the deposit part. The next thing would be contracts. So contracts are really, I guess, a difficult thing. It just it can be quite overwhelming. But It doesn't need to be. There's, I guess, to make it really simple, there's two main contracts. There's a contract of sale, what we refer to as a contract of sale, and then there's a build contract, which we often refer to as a HIA if you're building a home. So with the contract of sale, it's often referred to as a single part contract as well. And the HIA, if you hear anyone say that, it's just the Housing Industry Association contract. So typically with a house and land package, for those who aren't aware, it would often be a two-part contract, which would be both the contract of sale and the HIA. I'll put in grey there, or we put in grey there, just a little note that it could be a single-part contract for those SMSF buyers out there, or people that are looking for a different structure for a bunch of reasons, which we won't go into today. There is an ability for some builders to build out a home and land package, but be a single part, and that can often be what we call a 1090. So pay 10% up front, and then not pay anything throughout construction and pay the 90% balance at the end. In fact, in industry markets like now, it's more like 595. So I've actually put 995 there. My apologies, but 5% up front with 95% of the balance. So won't go into the detail, but we could always help people understand that afterwards for those SMSF buyers or people with lower deposits and are going to struggle to pay those construction payments throughout the building of a house. Obviously, if it's already a completed home, it would be just a contract of sale in general. Townhouses are often a two-part contract as well, so a contract of sale and a HIA, or again, like a home and land, it can do just a single contract of sale or a 1090 or a 595. And then apartments are often just a one-part contract, often referred to as a contract of sale. The point being is contracts are relatively boring. You've done all the hard work. You've found the right property. You've found the right location. You've saved up all your money. You've got your deposits ready, and you need to execute contracts is the point. So we take you through the entire part. But one key thing to mention for those who haven't done it is you'll need a solicitor or conveyancer to look over those contracts. But I, by you, along with Steady On, will actually manage the entire thing for you. So we'll prepare your contracts through an online system called DocuSign, making it really easy for you to click through and execute contracts should you get to that stage. So what happens after you pay deposits or execute contracts? Well, it depends on whether you've got a titled property or untitled. So titling for first home buyers or people who have never built new before, title means essentially it's ready to go. Whether that be an apartment that's now ready or a townhouse that's now ready to get into straight away, or whether it be a block of land that's ready to have a builder go to it straight away. If it's titled, it means you're going to have to be ready to settle really quickly. What settling means is that your broker will have to go and apply for formal finance approval, meaning they can go and get you the money from the bank, ready for you to then pay for the rest of that property or that block of land, so settle on the property. So tiling is pretty exciting. It's a pretty major step, and when you get to that point, you should be cheersing yourself and saying congratulations because you've made it through a big hurdle. If it's untitled, it means you've just got to wait. So often with a lot of the home and land packages we do, and even townhouse projects and apartments, the property, whether it be the land or the property being the townhouse development or the apartment building, isn't actually ready yet, and therefore it's called untitled. It's due to title or due to be ready in a date in the future. That might be weeks, but more like months and sometimes years. Now, with an investor, people would often want a block of titled land or a titled property ready to go right now in order to get a return on their investment via renting it out. However, sometimes untitled gives people time, gives you time to get your finances in order, and gives you time to just continue to save up for deposits perhaps. So often with first home buyers, we wouldn't be looking for a block of titled land in the home and land space. We'd actually be looking for a block that might be titling in a year's time, let's say mid 2021. And that means you could actually secure via putting through deposits and executing contracts or signing contracts. You could secure a property, and then you would actually have that year until it titles in order to save up the remainder of the deposit, staying close to your broker, which is really important because things can change in that time, getting ready to settle when that block titles, and then the builder can go and build it. If it's not a home and land package, it just means that the builder, the developer for a townhouse or apartment project is getting the building out of the ground, as we'd say, and building it out, and when it's ready, they would let you know, and you would then get ready to settle on the property. So deposits and contracts feels like the major step, and it is, and that's a really key stage. The official part is actually then settling on the property, which is when you handle your cash over, which is the sad part but exciting part. After that, big congratulations, and then you wait and you receive a certificate of occupancy, which is essentially a little letter that says you can now move into it or you can rent the property out. Now, one thing we wanted to talk about today and mention, which we'd actually love to dig in a bit more, but for the sake of time, we'll have to cut it short, is rent vesting. Rent vesting is a vehicle that a lot of first home buyers and even first time investors are using. And it's an ability to, I guess, rent where you want to live whilst purchasing a property somewhere else. In fact, rent vesting isn't actually unique to property. It could be that you rent where you want to live and spend the money you'd spend on a property or an asset like a property elsewhere, perhaps in the share market, for example. Now, we love property, and in times like this, we want consistent assets that can weather the storm, which we feel property is. But it is the ability to spend what you would normally spend on your mortgage on rent to live where you want to live, so a more desirable location, whilst your tenants in your other property actually pay that mortgage down. So the balance is all about understanding what are you able to spend and what would your mortgage repayments be. Can you then spend the same amount but living where you want to live? Because perhaps the property where you want to live just isn't affordable. And I've got friends, we've got clients and colleagues who do exactly that, where they're able to live in a more desirable location, cut down their travel time, be close walking distance to cafes and restaurants, and live a different lifestyle for a period of time, whilst their asset further out, perhaps is the typical example, is rented out and getting good rental yield, as we spoke about before, and paying off their mortgage. So really the balance is actually getting it so you're spending no more or no less than what you would be otherwise, but you're living, I guess, maybe arguably a more desirable or better life. Now, we see it becoming more popular, particularly as housing prices or values increase over time, and income doesn't match that curve. So it's only getting harder to get in, and therefore new property with low deposits, as well as rent vesting, are becoming really popular vehicles for getting into the property market. What I would say is that we'd probably rather talk less than what we have, and we'd probably just want to sit down alongside you and help you explore what that might look like as an option. Not saying it's right, but definitely not saying it's wrong, but definitely an option you should be considering. Over to you, Ryan, to wrap it up, and I don't think we've gone too far over.
Yes. Look, hopefully this has been very informative. Probably in wrapping this up, if there are any questions you want, or you want a more detailed, please contact myself and I'll be able to, or jump onto the Steady On website, and and we at Steady On will be able to help point you in the right direction. And probably from this webinar, hopefully you can sort of identify where you sit in this whole process. Is it something that you're just sort of thinking about now? I want to get in the property market. I don't quite have a deposit. Well, can I maybe use Six Park, Ted and Six Park to help fast track that deposit to be able to get in there? Or I think I've got a good deposit, but I've got to get my finances in order. So I sit in that. Or I've got my finances in order and I'm looking to identify and what's the best purchase for me. So just identifying where you are. And as I said from the start, us at Steady On can help you out with the conveyancing, obviously point in the right direction, finance, the whole box and dice. There's been some really informative questions. Some other come through before, which was very, very interesting in terms about hopefully it's given us what the current climate, some of the debunking some of the fears that have been in there. But excuse me, I'm just putting through some questions that have come up. Questions here. Maybe this could be something I'll put out to the panelists. What is the cost and fee difference between just buying to own, occupy, or just buying to rent and rent vesting?
Good question. That's for you, Andrew. You're on mute, mate.
So I suppose the major cost difference is basically the increase in the rate. You're going to get a better interest rate if you buy to own or occupy than if you are buying to rent in the rent vesting side of things. There's about a 30 to 40 basis point difference in the interest rate, even though we are looking at really low rates. You know, as I said, you can buy an owner-occupied rate for 219 and you can have an investment rate at 249. So there's not a huge amount of difference, but it is slightly more expensive. So, but depending on circumstances, I don't think the cost difference should should affect the objectives in what you're doing. Because we're at all-time low interest rates and all other fees and costs are the same, but it's just probably the interest rate that changes when you decide on the purpose.
And one thing I jump in and add there is that we often help people sit down and I guess try and put a number on what is the value? How do you quantify the value of living where you want to live? Because it's a really interesting thing. Often our parents' generation, I shouldn't say that because I'm obviously showing different age groups, but often our parents' generation wouldn't understand buying a property to rent it out and then renting somewhere else. Quite a unique concept in some regards, but putting a dollar value on what does it mean to you to not have to sit in traffic, or what does it mean to be able to just walk around to the local cafe and bump into your friends? There's a hard to quantify value there that Rentvesting can help with, and also the affordability around buying somewhere else. It allows you to be a bit more strategic and buy the best possible property which will perform and grow for you, rather than buying on emotion, which often happens on a first home. Not saying emotion's wrong, but it often becomes something for a first home buyer, whereas we often get them to sit back and pause and just understand what are the long-term objectives, because it's very few, less than I think about 3% of first home buyers end up staying in their home forever. So it's an interesting one to try and quantify, which we help people do all the time.
I had another good question. What's the benefits of investing or having multiple properties? And I suppose I think doing the first property is the big step for everyone. But once you've realised, it is a pretty easy process when you get guided along, and it's not as scary as people think. To have equity and build a portfolio just gives you a lot of flexibility and the ability to be a little bit more aggressive in your investments. Any of the other panelists have any other thoughts on that?
Oh, I think the major benefit is you're building up your amount of assets and therefore your total asset position. So to break that down to dollars and cents, you've got assets that are actually growing in value and therefore setting up your future. So I'm open to the audience to say that I don't like the words wealth creation. However, I guess it's setting up your future position regarding wealth. So if you're buying properties and you're buying them well, meaning getting the fundamentals right, you're going to find that those assets are growing in value. And then when it is time to cash in, just to use that term, you've obviously made the most of your money. So you'd argue that with the interest rates with banks, you'd argue that depending on how you look at the share market, that buying property and having multiple assets grow is just essentially improving your total asset position should the time come to cash in, whether it be retirement or another goal that you might have. So we feel that the property is the way to do that.
And final question we'll answer. The question, should I hold off to invest in anything until COVID-19's finished? Well, hopefully we've answered that, and I suppose it did come down to our cornerstone and the fundamental of your position is your finance position. Look, this COVID-19 is very uncertain and unprecedented times. Who knows how long it's going to go for? So I think like any investment or any purchase, especially of a property, everyone, when's a good time? Should I buy? Should I save some more? I think once you get in and get the process done, that the history tells it through all previous, world wars and everything like that, the market will generally go up over the long term. So I think if you're in that good financial position, I think now's as good time as any.
I'll also just add there that that's about getting the property right is so important in that question, or addressing that question. So if you got in and then had to sell, and it's a good thing to think about, what if I bought a property or what if I bought an investment that I had to sell? Making sure that you've got a sellable asset is really important. So buying anything is not the way to go. Buying the cheapest is not necessarily the way to go. It's about buying the best that your budget can afford, and that's about being strategic with location, builder, developer, even down to what specifications in the house, how the house flows or how the residence flows, how much light gets in. All these little things will add up to give you a better asset than John Smith down the road. So it's about finding the best possible outcome for your situation, so that if you did have to move that asset, you're in the best position to do so. You're not caught with it. So I'd say that no, now is definitely the right time. Should you be in the right finance position? We're certainly investing. We're certainly seeing our clients investing, but getting the asset right is even more important than ever before.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I'd like to thank our panelists today. It's been very much very informative, I believe. Again, if you want to go down this path further and want a little bit more in-depth and personal meeting, definitely contact us. Jump on the Steady On website and our contact details there, and be able to guide you and point you in the right direction. Stay safe, everyone. Have a wonderful